All right, are you guys ready to rock? Everybody's got a Bible. Everybody's got their workbooks. We're on lesson number 23. Greetings to those of you that are joining us online. Your assignment tonight will be, I'll give it to you at the end for everybody. One quick note, if you have not turned in your quiz yet, the last quiz, be sure to do that, right? No quiz, no pass. Right? We don't have a lot of assignments in here, so make sure that gets in, all right? Otherwise, you will end up doing that sometime this summer. That doesn't sound like any fun at all. So, the quiz is located at the end of the video, and it's on the website. So go to the website, little document there. You don't have to copy it off. Just send me the answers. I believe there are 30 questions, so get that in ASAP so we don't get buried. We have about 2 months left, 8 classes. And we're going to finish the rest of the booklet by that time. So kind of stay tuned and we'll get into that. Let's see. What important holiday did we just have? Oh, good job. I wanted to start with the easy questions so that you guys get that sense of security in your ego. Right? So we've been talking about, hi Ada, we've been talking about the life of Jesus. That has been the focus of the last 2 weeks. And so we talked about, this doesn't sound very creative, a way to break it down, but it's the early, the middle, and now the later ministry of Jesus. How long was Jesus' public ministry?
3 years?
Yeah, roughly 3 years, three and a half years. The reason we know that is because we follow certain things in his Gospels that have annual occurrences. And in the Gospel of John, there are 3 different Passover celebrations as he's an adult. 3 Passovers. So roughly around Easter time is when Passover is, give or take, a week or so. And so if there's 3 Passovers, that means there's roughly 3 weeks, and there are 3 years, and a little bit of time as we go through that. So tonight, I want to focus on his later ministry, and actually that's going to dovetail really well for us tonight, guys, with Easter, because obviously Jesus' ministry culminates, well, not culminates because there's a little bit more after the resurrection, but it does culminate with his purpose. His purpose was to come and die, and then rising again was obviously the end of his duty to salvation of the world. But then there's some additional teaching, and we'll touch on that just briefly tonight. So, page 93 in your workbook, number 23 is where we are. And so let's jump down to the second paragraph there on page 93. It starts out with, Jesus is true God. All right, Leah, would you read that for me, please?
Jesus is true God. Remember John 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
All right, stop there. Now, when it capitalizes word, why is that? Why is it capitalized? Usually when things are capitalized, it's a formal name of something. Jason? You're close. You're close. It usually would, except for this verse. Landry?
Since they're referring that the Word was God.
Okay. So who is the Word? What's the right answer in confirmation class? It's always Jesus. Right? So if you look at that verse again that Leah just read, it says, in the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. Okay, just so you guys understand. So when John is using that, it's an analogy. Every other time in the Bible, it's going to refer to the Bible, the law, Word of God, and so forth. But here, specifically, because it is capitalized, and because obviously it is paralleling God, the Word is God, with God, was God, obviously it's referring to Jesus. Leah, keep going.
But God came down and became one of us. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glorious as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. As we continue to look at Jesus' early life on this earth, we see both his humanity and his divinity.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So that second verse there, verse 14, it talks about, he says, and the Word and Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us. Word of God can't put on flesh, right? It's just paper and ink or tablets or papyrus, they would have called it back then. And it says then, and we have seen his glory, right? So the his obviously is referring to a man, a male, and so obviously then we kind of make the assessment that it's Jesus. The big picture here. Connor, would you read that for us in the brown box?
After Peter's confession of Jesus as the Messiah and Son of God, Jesus sets his eye on Jerusalem, where he will suffer, die, and be raised again in order to fulfill God the Father's plan of salvation. Jesus tells his disciples what will happen to him, but they cannot accept it. They won't fully understand Jesus' work until after his resurrection. Jesus teaches his disciples with parables and identifies himself as God through his many I am statements, taking Peter, James, and John with him up to a high mountain. Jesus is transfigured, shining with divine glory. Jesus talks with Moses and Elijah as the disciples stare in wonder. God the Father repeats his proclamation made at Jesus' baptism. This is my beloved Son. As Jesus moves closer to Jerusalem, he makes a stop at Bethany, where he assures Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life, and then awakes her brother Lazarus from sleep.
Very good. So you guys know that story. We're going to look at it briefly today. When Lazarus dies, Jesus goes and he talks with Mary and Martha, and then obviously raises Lazarus back to life. When you guys look at that timeline at the bottom of that page, you can see that we're getting really, really close to the beginning of the church, right? So the church begins when Jesus ascends back to heaven, and obviously his disciples are sent out, and not just the 12, right? But everyone who believed in him, everybody who followed him, is sent out to make disciples. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means for us tonight. All right, flip the page. Page 94. Open up your Bibles to Matthew 16. Matthew 16. The four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Matthew chapter 16. We're going to begin with verse 21. Now, there's several places in the Bible that Jesus foretells his death and his resurrection. And so you got to understand that no one has ever been resurrected before. So when he describes this, this is something brand new. Even those that were brought back to life were not resurrected. Okay, so let me try to make that clear of what I'm talking about. I just mentioned the story of Lazarus, raising Lazarus back to life. And we're going to talk about that toward the end of class tonight. Lazarus is not resurrected. Okay? Guys, tell me what you believe from what we've studied so far, what you know in the Bible and so forth. What is the resurrection going to be all about, Landry?
It's going to be Jesus just going to heaven finally.
You're partly right, yes. What's it going to mean for people? What's the resurrection for people? Shiloh?
Everlasting life.
It's going to be the transition into everlasting life, right? So I don't want to be morbid. I know a guy named Tony. He passed away about 10 years ago. So Tony's gone, buried in a cemetery, okay? Jesus comes back, second time, right? His return. And at that point is Judgment Day. And everyone will be resurrected. Tell me what that is.
We aren't just given our old lives back, we're given new lives.
Now when you say new life, what do you mean?
New bodies.
There you go, right? So the bodies are raised, they're perfected, they're glorified, and so forth. So Jesus on Easter morning, we just celebrated yesterday, he was resurrected. Okay? He's the only one that's been resurrected. The ones that have been brought back to life. There was a little girl that he healed once, right, that was dead. Brought her back to life. There was a servant. There was Lazarus. However, they were not resurrected because their bodies weren't glorified. So to put it this way, Lazarus died, and then 4 days later, Jesus brings him back to life. Was Lazarus going to die again? Probably so. Otherwise, he'd be 2,000 years old and we'd know him, right? So he's not walking around the earth today with a glorified body without any sin, without any damage, without any illness. It doesn't break down. It's just, he died again. So, of the people that Jesus raised to life, the uniqueness that they had is they all died twice. Died once, illness or whatever. Jesus raised them to life again, and then they eventually died again due to old age, due to a disease, an accident, whatever the case may be. Jesus is the only one so far that's been resurrected. On Judgment Day, God will raise all people back to life, all of them, and then they will be judged, heaven and hell. Okay? Now those going to hell are going to have glorified bodies, right? Their bodies obviously are going to be suffering a great deal apart from God. And we'll probably talk about that next year when we talk a little bit more about heaven and hell. Okay. All right. So Jesus foretells a little bit. Foretells means he's telling it's coming. So he's kind of giving the news of what's going to happen. It says, Jesus began to tell his disciples that he would suffer many things, be killed, and rise on the third day. Now, you can imagine if you were a disciple of Jesus and your rabbi, that's a word for teacher, told you that he was going to suffer and die, you probably wouldn't like that message, right? He's like, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. The religious leaders are going to capture me. They're going to beat me. They're going to kill me. But on the third day, I'm going to rise again. Again, this hasn't happened to anybody or anything like he's describing. So they're not really sure what he means. He's like, oh, you're going to be resurrected. Right? There's not a connection that they're making. He's saying in 3 days, I'm going to rise to life again. You're like Lazarus did? Or like that little girl? I mean, is that, so who's going to do it? Because you always did it, right? So what does this mean? So they don't really know what's going on with this. Let's see. Jace, would you read for us Matthew 16, 21 through 23?
From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. So Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of men.
Okay, so it says Peter took Jesus aside and said, Jesus, Lord, let me talk to you. And he rebukes him. That means he kind of hollers at him, right? He's upset with Jesus. Don't tell us that you're going to die. If we're going to go to Jerusalem and you're going to die, we trust that you're special, right? Whether we believe completely that you're the Son of God and fully understand that, they believed what he was saying. I imagine they were saying, then let's not go to Jerusalem. Right? If somebody told you, if we go into that haunted house, I'll never come out again, then you'd go, let's not go into the haunted house. Okay? I mean, it seems to make sense. Don't go to Jerusalem then. And so then Jesus is kind of hollering back at Peter and saying, get behind me. And what does he call Peter? He says, get behind me what? Satan. Ooh, that's an insult. Right? I mean, he's saying that, Peter, you are on the influence of the devil by what you're saying. Okay? So on the bottom of that paragraph, it says, what did Peter have to say about this? So what do you guys think? What did Peter have to say? Put it in your own words. Shiloh? Yeah, it would never happen. Write that down. Right? Peter was saying it'll never happen. It'll never happen. Maybe you think of something like Peter wants to stop it. Right? It'll never happen. Not on my watch. I won't let it. Whatever the case may be. Peter is often, you guys should know this from just reading, hearing stories, sermons that we've preached and so forth. Peter is often the first one to talk. I don't know if he was kind of the teacher's pet. Some people think that maybe Peter was the oldest disciple because there's a time where his mother-in-law is sick. Now, if he has a mother-in-law, what does that mean about Peter? He's married. There's no other mention of any other disciples being married. So if he's the only one married, he might be the oldest. If he's the oldest, he probably feels the need to speak up for the other disciples. When they're in the boat, Jesus walking on the water, who cries out to Jesus and say, call me out there to walk on the water? Peter, right? When everybody else scatters and nobody stays with Jesus during the court case where he's going to be tried and convicted to be crucified, who's out in the courtyard? Peter. right? Peter's often the first one. Who do people say that I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Peter, okay? So here's one of those times, and Jesus is saying, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, chief priests, scribes, all the religious leaders. Now, guys, help me out with this. Why do the religious leaders hate Jesus so much? Is it just a personality thing?
They're teaching other religions.
Well, in a way, yeah, what are they teaching? What do the religious leaders kind of focus on of Jesus' time? Tradition, right? The traditions. Follow the rules. That's the only way to please God. And Jesus shows up, kind of a different kind of rabbi, okay? And rabbi, again, means teacher. His message is, trust in me. There's grace, there's mercy, there's love. There's still the law, right? There's still rules, but the rules don't get you into heaven. I get you into heaven, right? You trust in me that I'm going to pay for your sins. You can't pay for them. You can't be good enough to make all the bad go away. That's really what he's pointing out. And we always give them kind of a bad name, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of religious leaders. But really, I think, and I'm not defending them either, they are afraid that the people are going to be led astray by this new teaching. Okay? It's like, I don't even know if you guys recognize this. In your math classes, do you guys do the new math? Is that what it's called now? Does that sound familiar to anybody in your math classes? New math? The reason I'm asking that, and I've been out of the teaching game for a while. I was a biology teacher in high school for 10 years, but a long time ago. When my kids were in high school, they started taking math classes, obviously, in high school, and started learning new math. So the way that they would come to a solution was different than the way I learned. Does that sound familiar? You guys ever have any homework with your parents and they're like going, I don't know how to do that? That's because they've changed some of the ways to do it. It's not wrong, but it's different. I can tell you, I can understand what these religious leaders are saying. You know, I would sit down with my son, Zach, he's our oldest, and he would show some algebra, and I'd kind of go, okay, this is what he'd go, Dad, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, you got to do it to both sides and solve for X and so forth. He goes, that's not what we do. We draw a table and we put all these numbers and lines and things. I'm like, I have no idea why you're doing that, right? And so I would say, well, listen, I can get you the answer by doing this, but you got to show it this way. And I'm like, that's different. I don't like the new math, okay? And so naturally, the religious leaders, they hear Jesus teach, and they're like, why don't you stay with us, teach what we teach, because you seem very popular. That would be good for us, okay? But you're teaching a different way. We don't want to follow that. And eventually it escalated to, we hate you, we want to get rid of you, and then they were plotting to kill him. So obviously this grew into something. They were really afraid for the people's salvation, that they were going to end up trusting in this Jesus. And Jesus had kind of zero credentials. I mean, what did he grow up doing? He was a carpenter. Right? That's like a guy showing up here at church saying, I'm going to be your new pastor. And they're like, well, did you go to the seminary? Did you go to school for this? Nope. Did you read a lot of books and things like that? Nope. What did you do before this? I worked at McDonald's. I used to make fries. Right? And well, I don't know if you should be our pastor, if you could lead us, right? And yet Jesus, in his ministry, people eventually started hearing him talk, and they're like, he speaks with authority, right? He teaches in a way that we've never heard before. This is really good. And it makes sense, and it works, and so forth. So anyhow, that's kind of a long way of saying this is kind of how it breaks down. How did Jesus respond to him? We're going to keep going here under this foretelling of his death and resurrection. Jesus calls Peter Satan. Jot that down. Jesus calls Peter Satan, which he's basically saying, he said, listen, Satan wants to undermine what I'm doing, right? Satan doesn't want Jesus to succeed at saving the world, okay? I don't know if you guys have ever seen, I hope you haven't really at your age. I'm just going to kind of highlight something. Maybe you have seen it or understand what it is. There was a movie about Jesus that was done, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago. It's called The Passion of the Christ. It was done by Mel Gibson. Not that Mel Gibson's a movie star, but he directed it. And it's a very graphic movie about the suffering that Jesus did on Holy Week. So it shows the beatings at the hands of the Romans and the crucifixion. And it's very graphic. It's not, I don't want to say it's gratuitous, which means we overdo it, but it shows how much suffering his body went through. I guess that's the safe way to say it. Anyhow, I tell you all that to tell you this. In the movie, and it's a 2-hour movie just about Holy Week, there's a character in the movie that is Satan. A really creepy looking character. Really white and pale. And to be honest, this was kind of interesting. When you look at him, makeup and the way his face is all kind of created, you don't know whether he's male or female, which kind of makes it uneasy, right? You're kind of like going, I'm not sure what this is, right? I know it's kind of human-like, but it's big robe and the face, and you're like, I don't know if it's male or female. Pretty sure it's male when his voice is, and he's always speaking in Aramaic and the biblical language and so forth. But he's always nagging at Jesus when Jesus is praying in Gethsemane. If you know the story, he goes with the disciples, kind of goes away and prays by himself. Father, pass this cup from me so I don't have to go through it. And he's crying and sweat like blood and so forth. And while he's praying in the movie, and this is not necessarily biblical, but it's possible, Satan is kind of off to the side talking to him, right? And he's saying, nobody should have to go through what you're going through. You shouldn't do this, right? No one can succeed to do this. You can understand how Satan is trying to stop him from succeeding at saving all of mankind. Because if he does, then that means there's no solution for any of us, right? We would all be judged along with Satan and so forth. So anyhow, so that's kind of where Jesus is criticizing Peter by saying, you are listening to Satan, which means you're trying to give into the temptation to stop him. Now, Peter's motivation was good, wasn't it? Right? Because he was saying, Jesus, don't go to Jerusalem then. Right? Don't say that you're going to go there. If you're going to die, if you believe that's what's going to happen, then don't go. Let's go to Bethany. Let's go somewhere else, but don't go someplace where there's going to be harm. And Jesus is like, you don't understand. That's what has to happen. Otherwise, you're all doomed, right? That means hell is in the future for every person. Every person. Nobody's saved, right? And he's like said this over and over again. That's why he's like, get behind me, Satan. You don't know what you're talking about. Slide over right a little bit. The word transfiguration, that little cartoon with Jesus up there, says Jesus took his inner circle of disciples. You should underline these 3 names. That looks like a good question for a quiz. Peter, James, and John. That's the inner circle. He often took them when there was something intentional to teach them. Maybe a special miracle, maybe on like this, the transfiguration, or some kind of teaching. He would often take those 3 aside. Takes him to a high mountain. There Jesus was transfigured. Trans means to change your figure, right? Your form is altered. Completely changed in appearance as his body became dazzling white. If you want to get an idea of what the resurrection would create in a body, this is probably close to it. The disciples were terrified. Moses and Elijah appeared and talked with Jesus. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and the disciples heard a voice say, "This is my beloved son, listen to him." In your Bibles, go to Mark 2. Mark 9, not Mark 2. Mark 9, verse 2. Mark 9. Matthew, Mark. Mark 2, 2 through 13. Let's see. Zach, would you read that first paragraph up through 8?
And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and led them up to the high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely lighted, and as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah and Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let's make 3 tents, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved son, listen to him." And suddenly he looked around, and they no longer saw anyone with them but Jesus only.
Very good, thank you. So who's the first one to speak? Peter. There it is again. It's always Peter. Okay? And he wants to build shelters because what he wants is this is a good place to be. Jesus is here. Moses and Elijah. Now, there's a lot of questions I have with this. It doesn't come out in the story. One is, how did they know it was Moses and Elijah? They wouldn't recognize them. These guys were from 1,000 years before them, right? Also, I have a question. Moses, he died, right? So this probably, and I can't say this for sure because the Bible doesn't tell us, I don't imagine that he's resurrected because resurrection comes on Judgment Day. Judgment Day hasn't happened yet. So is it his spirit? Did God just do something special and have Moses pop up? Now, can you guys tell me, you guys should remember this, we did talk about it. Why would Elijah possibly be there? What was unique about Elijah?
He did that.
He didn't die, right? Was taken to heaven in a whirlwind, fiery chariots and so forth with Elijah and Elisha. Remember when Elisha was going to be his replacement, and so he said, you may see me go off to heaven. So in some ways, Elijah is not dead and, I don't mean to be gross, decomposing in the ground. Moses had been gone for 1,000 years, right? And so Moses shows up, Elijah shows up, Peter says, hey, we should stay here. Let's build shelters for you three. Isn't it interesting that two guys, Moses and Elijah, that are brought from someplace, heaven, the throne room of God, whatever, Peter thinks we ought to make a shelter for them. He's like, they're probably not like human bodies like ours anymore or something. I don't know. But that's what Peter's answer was. So it says here underneath, what did Jesus' transfiguration show the disciples? Underneath that, what would you write there? What did Jesus' transfiguration show the disciples? What did they learn from this moment? Landry? Jesus is God. That's a great statement. Jesus is God. All right? What else did they learn? What do you think the significance of Moses and Elijah was? What was Elijah? What was his job title? And Joe? He was a prophet. What was Moses responsible for getting from God? The law. So what is Jesus often referring to in the Bible? The law and the prophets. So Jesus fulfills, there they are, two advocates for him. He's fulfilled the law and all the messages of the prophets, right? So Jesus has fulfilled the law. Jot that down. Jesus fulfilled the law and the prophets, right? Remember, prophets are messengers of God, and the message was always, God is going to redeem his people. God is going to send a Messiah, and suddenly here is Jesus the Messiah, right, on the scene. Underneath that it says, do the words of the voice, that's God the Father, by the way, sound familiar? In what other account do we hear those words? This is my beloved Son, whom I love. Listen to him. Where did we hear those words before, Ada?
Jesus' baptism.
Jesus' baptism. Jot that down. Jesus' baptism. All right. Next one, I want you to turn to Luke 15. Matthew, Mark, Luke. Luke 15, one of my favorite stories, the prodigal son. Now, chapter 15, if you guys are there are three stories that it starts with. Go to verse 1. What three stories do we have? They all kind of have something in common. Shiloh?
Lost sheep, lost coin, and prodigal son.
The prodigal son, or the lost son. So we got three things that are lost, right? Lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, prodigal son, okay? The prodigal son's a much longer story. Now, I want you to understand, this is what's important about having the Bible in front of you. If we look at verse number 1 and 2, Ava, would you read those two verses, 1 and 2? Of 15.
Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers saw the law and muttered, this man welcomes the sinners and feeds them.
Read one more verse for me.
Then Jesus told this parable.
Stop right there. Good. So here's what's so important about that, and that's why I asked Ava to read that. We have to understand, why did Jesus tell this story? Okay? A lot of times if you guys tell someone a story, there's a reason for it. Maybe they want information. Maybe you're trying to make a point. Many times if you guys have listened to me preach long enough, I use stories a lot. right? Sometimes there's stories from my family, from my past, or some story that seems to be relevant. But you understand that story should, I hope, ties into what I want to teach you or what I want to tell you, right? So as we see this, so Jesus is spending time with tax collectors and sinners, which means these are unpopular people. And I don't mean popular as far as, being, like popularity, but they're unpopular because they stand out from the crowd. Guys, who would be kind of our versions in our culture of tax collectors and sinners? If they were in this room that you'd go, yeesh. What kind of people would we all kind of, we shouldn't, by the way, as Christians, but who would we kind of look at somebody and go, ugh, they're sinful. What do you guys think? Right? Let's say criminals from jail, right? Let's say you see, people that live a lifestyle that is much different than ours. Shiloh?
Maybe people that have different religions.
Yeah, maybe a person that's a Buddhist or a Muslim, and we'd go, boy, they don't believe what we believe. And Joe? Homeless people, very good. I thought you said hobo people. That was, not too far off, actually. Homeless people. Landry? Okay. So if we had people around here like that, they'd go, well, should they be? In fact, I've been kind of critical of people here at church. I have been in the past where I've served before. What should we do? Let's say, for instance, that a woman came in to church that we knew was an exotic dancer. That's somebody who dances and probably does more with their body than they should in front of people, and it's inappropriate. And so we'd see that and kind of go, so what should we do as a church if somebody came in like that at church? Show them where to sit. That's all we should do, right? Instead, that there's people that would probably sit there and go, oh my, that's inappropriate. What you do or how you act or how you live, that's inappropriate, okay? Or maybe you see somebody that comes in that's all tatted up, and they look like they're probably part of a gang or something, and got a teardrop right here. Now in gangs, when you have a teardrop right there, it means you've killed somebody. So you see somebody like that, you're like, oh, you shouldn't be in our Lutheran church. This isn't for you. And yet, that's who Jesus hung out with, right? So the reason I tell you all that, I apologize, I probably took that farther than I needed to. They're with it, and so what did the religious elite? They grumbled, and they said, this man eats with sinners and hangs out with them. So then Jesus tells them this story. Actually, 3 stories. One is about a lost sheep. Pretty easy to tell, right? What do you do with a lost sheep? Go find them. If these sinners and tax collectors... By the way, why were tax collectors hated in Jesus' time?
Because they worked for the Roman government.
They worked for the Roman government. They collected their money, the Jewish money, and gave it to the Roman government. The Roman government had oppressed, captured the Holy Land, and so forth. So all of our Old Testament studies would be like you working for Babylon or working for Syria or whatever the case may be. All right? So it says this, it talks about a man with a lost sheep, goes and finds it. Lost coin, woman finds it. But then he gets to the prodigal son. All right? So because time is a little short this morning, I'm going to summarize the story. You should know this to some degree. You probably heard it in Sunday school. I preached on it a time or two. So there's 2 sons, younger one and older one. Younger one comes to dad. Now the rule is you get your inheritance once your parents pass away. That's when you get their resources to you. It passes on by name, right? We don't all do that, but it's kind of like if you imagine there's a will, right, that you guys we think of those things. That's a legal document that says my children get this, okay? So in Jesus' time, same kind of thing. So the older son, according to Jewish law, would get what they call a double portion. Because he's oldest, he gets double what everybody else gets. So there's 2 boys. So 2/3, if you're doing the math, 2/3 goes to the older son, 1/3 goes to the youngest son. Now, the older son doesn't get anything because dad's not gone yet. But the youngest son, he tells dad, I don't want to wait for you to die. I want what's coming to me now. Right? That's really disrespectful, dishonoring, and so forth. But dad, in the story, it's a story, he complies. He goes, okay. Now, you can understand if he's going to give this son 1/3 of his resources, what does that mean he has to do with his stuff? Dad's got to sell it, got to move things around, got to take money out of the bank, whatever. He's not just going, yeah, it's sitting in a box or in a back room or something like that. He's like, no, I'm going to have to sell some of my fields and some of my sheep, and I'm going to have to sell, this in order to give you what you have, coming once I'm gone, but you want it now. So then the young boy, the young son goes off into a foreign land. All of this is symbolic, right? Because it's a story. Goes off in a foreign land and lives badly. Starts hanging out with those exotic dancers, right? And partying and drinking and all this kind of... It just basically says he lives a very bad lifestyle. That's all it really comes down to. We can use our imaginations. And then he's out of money. And suddenly he's out of friends. And then a famine hits the area where he's living, which means now there's hardship and there's no help for him. And so he's working to feed pigs at a farm. Now, the reason that's really bad, do you guys know anything about Jewish diet, right, for Jews? Do you know one of the things that they're not supposed to eat? Pork, right? And so working with pigs is not only demeaning, but he couldn't do anything about it, right? He couldn't I'm going to eat one of these pigs, Not that he probably wouldn't get fired for doing that, but it was even more demoralizing. So as Jesus is telling this story, his listeners are kind of going, this guy's really got it bad. Okay. Now remember, to go back to what Ava read a minute ago, there is a reason Jesus is telling this story. There's the lost sheep, the lost coin, and now a much more elaborate story. So the youngest son, right? What does he come to realize? You guys should know this story. What does the youngest son realize? Starving, gonna die. What does he decide to do? Go back home. Right? It tells it in here. He says, he realizes, I am my father's son. I still have a connection to dad. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to beg to try to live there again. I'll tell him I'll try to make it all right. I'm sorry for what I did. I dishonored you and all these things. And he's kind of rehearsing this. And he comes back. And if you know the story, Dad sees him coming from a long ways off. Now, what you realize is if Dad sees him coming, what's Dad been spending his time doing? Looking for him. Watching for him every day. Maybe he'll come home today. So he runs out to greet him. That was absolutely embarrassing for a father to do, but he was willing to do it. Because this is what should have happened, right? He starts coming a little closer, right? Dad, just do this. Sit there and tap his sandal, wait on the porch and go, let's hear it. Let's hear the apology. Grovel, right? You've been a terrible son, okay? Instead, he runs out, he hugs him, wraps his arms around him. Understand this guy's been feeding pigs. Have you ever seen pigs? They're kind of messy, right? And so this boy is probably covered, probably doesn't smell all that good, okay? And he wraps him up, hugs him, puts a new robe on him, puts the ring on his finger, which means you're my son again, and wants to have a big party. He's celebrating a bad sinner that has repented. That seems like the story, okay? Because that lines up with the other two. A lost sheep is found, a lost coin is found, a lost son is found. However, what happens now in this story, this is really the culmination of it. The older son, he's kind of out in the field, doing what he's always doing, working for dad. Comes a little closer and goes, what's all the noise? Asks one of the servants. They said, your younger brother, who is lost, has come home and they're having a big feast. And he says, I'm not joining. I am not going to participate. He dishonored dad. He's a lousy brother, and so I'm not gonna go in there and celebrate his return. Dad comes out. Come on in. It's so great that your brother is back. It's a wonderful celebration. Please come in. And he goes, I've been working here my whole life. I've never dishonored you, never took anything. You wouldn't even give me a small goat to butcher and have a party, right? You never did anything for me. Now, let me ask you this question. Who does that sound like, the older brother? Because he's not a notorious sinner, but he won't come into the banquet to party with the father, right, and the known sinners. Who does it sound like, Ada?
It sounds like the Pharisees who have always been doing the right thing.
Exactly right. And so for that reason, I'll tell you, that's kind of my sermon for tonight. This parable is actually about the Pharisees. And it's not about the tax collectors and the sinners. The first two are easy, right? You can read those stories. They're only a few verses long, right? And it's about a lost sheep. We find one, we're happy. Lost coin, find it, we're happy. Lost son, find him, or he comes back, we're happy. But then there's this other little tale on the story about the older brother. And we're like, well, why is that added in there? Remember in the very beginning, right? it says, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, and so he told them this parable. They're grumbling. He goes, this parable is for you guys. It's not for the tax collectors and the known sinners. This is for the guys that grumble. Okay. All right, so down at the bottom it says, what does the Father say? He says, jot this down, eat and celebrate, my son is alive. Jot that down. Eat and celebrate, my son is alive. Now, how does that help you understand the heart of God? Right? I guess this way. The heart of God is not like ours. Right? I jot that down. The heart of God is not like ours. Because how would you prefer to respond? If you were the father and your son who is rebellious came back, how would you want to respond, Landry?
Why are you
here? Yeah. Put him to work, right? Tell him you're going to be a slave in the house now. You're going to work for your brother. You're going to feed the pigs here. We'll give you some food and a cot to sleep in the barn, and so forth. But you ran away, right? And so there's punishment, there's consequences. Instead, what he's demonstrating is God's unbelievable grace and saying, even though you've been a lousy member of the family, and we could say as members of God's family, we sin and we disobey and we rebel against God. And what does God do? Every time you turn back to him and ask for forgiveness, he forgives you, right? He runs to you, right? He celebrates when we come back. And there's that challenge, because sometimes we'll see that, guys, almost as what we often call cheap grace, which means all I have to do is say sorry and God will forgive me. Well, that's true, right? Because God does forgive every single sin. But let me give you this example. Let's say, for instance, if Bodie was sitting up here near the lectern up here, and I crumple up a piece of paper and I just bop Bodie right off the top of the head with it, and I laugh, and Bodie goes, Pastor, that was funny, right? And I'm like, hey, Bodie, I'm sorry, okay? And okay, and I crumple up another piece of paper, and Bodie's kind of eyeing it now, right? And I bop him off the top of his head again, and I'm like, Bodie, seriously, I'm sorry, right? And he's like, yeah, okay. He doesn't feel quite the same way now, because he's like, that's twice. And I crumple up another piece of paper. He's starting to duck under his book and things like that, and so forth, and I bop him off his workbook and stuff like that. He's like, hey, listen, knock it off. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Okay? You get the idea that no matter how many times I'm sorry, I haven't changed what? I haven't changed my actions, right? I haven't done anything different. That's cheap grace. God, I'm sorry for doing that. And I do it again. God, I'm sorry. I do it again. Right? I'm sorry. When you recognize what Jesus has done for you, what he did in order to forgive you, when you understand what Good Friday is all about, that should change our behavior. I should stop crumpling up paper and bopping Bodie off the head, right? Instead, to be able to say, no, listen, change what you're doing. That's what repent means. Remember we talked about that a week or two ago? Repent means to turn away from your sin, not keep doing it and just going, God, I'm still sorry. Yep, sorry. Yep, sorry. Okay? He's like, that's not doing anything. That's just words. What I want you to do is do something different, right? Change your behavior. The Good Samaritan. I want to just touch on this. We've spent some time on this in the past a little bit. The Good Samaritan is another parable told by Jesus. We don't have to go to it, but it's Luke chapter 10. And what it is, it's about a guy that's traveling between Jerusalem and Jericho, and he's going to go through Samaria. Now, what do you guys remember about Samaria? North or southern kingdom? Northern or southern kingdom? Where's Samaria? Northern kingdom, right? So kind of eyeball it in your map in your head, right? We've got the northern kingdom taken away to Syria. Later on, 125 years later, southern kingdom taken away to Babylon. Eventually, some of the Jews from Syria are allowed to come back to the northern kingdom in Samaria, but they start to intermarry. They don't worship God in the Jerusalem temple, kind of have their own place. And then the Jews that come back to settle and rebuild the temple down in the southern kingdom, they kind of stay true to the Jewish way of life. The northern kingdom kind of blurs a little bit, okay? So they're not pure Jews in the north, and they believe they're pure Jews in the south. Everybody kind of follow me? Okay? So because of that, there's a lot of animosity between the two. You're not pure Jews. You don't worship in Jerusalem and so forth. So they get to hate The Samaritans, for that reason only. Haven't gone to war. They're all related. I mean, from way back when, they were the Hebrews. But because they won't follow us, you guys will hear this once in a while, and this isn't good. Sometimes we in the church will be critical of other churches, right? We might criticize the Catholic Church or the Baptist Church or something else. And sometimes those criticisms are as petty as the northern, southern kingdom, Jewish, Samaritan kind of thing. You know, it's like, well, those, Pentecostal Christians, they dance and sing in the aisles and stuff and making all sorts of racket during their services. And we all sit very stoically like good Lutherans and so forth. You're like, well, maybe that's not always the best. It's just different, right? It's okay if it's different, as long as it's biblical, right? Anyhow, so there's this conflict. So Jesus tells this story. Guy's going between the two cities, gets beat up by robbers, robbed, left half dead, and a guy comes walking by, and it's a priest, right? A priest that works at the temple in Jerusalem, leading worship. And he sees this guy, he's beaten up, he's bloody. They have certain rules, right, as a priest, that if you're going to serve as, I'll put it in terms that we understand, if they're going to serve as pastor for worship, you can't come in contact with blood and things, because blood is dirty, right? It's for the same reason if you guys get blood on you, you tend to wash it off, right? Like if I get blood on my shirt or I get blood on my pants, or some of you are like, well, I got to wash that off. It's not because we think it's unclean. It's just you're like, well, I shouldn't have blood on me, right? Now, they would take it a little farther, saying you cannot serve. So let's say, for instance, I'm on my way to church. I'm walking in on the parking lot. Somebody falls down on a step out there. Knees are bleeding and stuff like that. I'm like, I'd love to help you, but if I touch your blood, then I can't serve as pastor this morning. I have to go through this ritual. This is what the Jews would do. This ritual to be cleansed and so forth. And it took a couple days. So they see this guy, so the priest just goes, well, I can't touch him, and walk around. Left him there. A little bit later, a Levite comes along. A Levite is one that does a lot of the structural format of worship. He would help assist in the sacrifices and things like that of the animals in the temple. And he comes by, same thing. If I touch blood, come in contact with this, I'm unclean, and I'm not legally able to serve in the temple, and I have a much more important job to do. So he walks around the other way. So then comes the third guy. Remember, this is a story of Jesus. It's not necessarily really happened, but it's believable, right? As Jesus is telling us, they're all kind of like going, well, yeah, you can't touch the bloody guy because they're going to serve in the temple, right? We can't do that. I'll give that example later. And then comes the third guy, and it's a Samaritan. Now, you can understand Jesus is telling this to a bunch of Jewish people that are listening, and they would have said, oh, the Samaritans, they're bad, right? We don't like them. And I'm not going to equate it to somebody a group that we know, because we shouldn't have groups that we don't like. So the Samaritan comes by, has compassion on him, bandages up his wounds, takes him to a nearby hotel, a room to rent, pays for a room, tells the guy behind the desk saying, take care of him, get him a doctor, get him some more bandages, anything you need, I'll settle up with you when I come back. So he's willing to sacrifice his own resources, all of that. And so Jesus then asks his listeners, who was the good neighbor? Right? Now, obviously, they can't say, well, the priest was. The priest didn't do anything. Well, it's not the Levite. Levite didn't do anything. The Samaritan did. He helped him. And funny, here's kind of a sign of where things are for the Jews, is they can't even bring themselves to say the word Samaritan in the writing. They're like, the one who showed kindness to him. Right? And they're like, that would be sounds like. And they just hated the Samaritan. If we thought there was a group of people, I'll take a criminal from prison. And let's say a criminal from prison helps somebody like this Samaritan did. And you're like, I thought criminals in prison were all bad, right? And how can they be the good guy in a story? Okay? And you'd come to find out that, you know what, kindness can come from any place. And Jesus is really kind of expressing to this that we spend way too much time following laws and missing the point of what's best. Loving your neighbor is the key. Not whether or not you come in contact with blood before you go serve in the temple, or whether or not you can come in contact with something that's dirty or unclean. The best thing to do is to love one another. And that's the point that he's trying to make. All right, We have about 10 minutes here. Let me go to the next page. Page 95. Right? Jesus, I am sayings. All right. In the Old Testament, the name of God is Yahweh. You guys should remember that from earlier on in the year, which came from God himself when he told Moses, I am who I am. That's Exodus 3. If you remember, Yahweh was that special name. Why was it so special? How did the Hebrews treat it? You guys remember?
You can only say it on one day a year.
Yeah, you wouldn't even speak it out loud because it was such a special name. Now, I get where they're at with that. I mean, I get why it was so precious, but they took it and even over the top, saying it's so special, we can't even say it. And God's kind of going, I never really said that, right? It is special. It is me. It is my name. But if there's one thing that God has shown us is that he wants a connection with us, not this, don't even say my name, right? And so forth. Jesus identified himself as God many times with I am statements, all right? And he says in John 8, it says there, records Jesus saying, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Now, if you kind of understand grammar, that's not really appropriately, that's not good grammar, right? Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, it would be I was, right? Because it's Abraham was past tense, right? So it'd be like I am. Right? So it's what he's saying is the I am is Yahweh. So he's really making a point of I'm God. Okay? We're not going to look these up, but John 6:35, when he says I am the bread of life, next to that I want you to put the word manna. Right? Next to that I am the bread of life, put the word manna. So he's making a connection to that manna, that bread from heaven that God provided miraculously. I am the bread from heaven, and I'm going to provide for you as well. John 8:12, he says, I am the light of the world. I'd put there next to that, delivers us from darkness. Delivers us from darkness. John 10, I am the good shepherd. He leads us. I think that's fair. Leads us, cares for us. And then obviously John 11:25, I am the resurrection and the life. He saves us. Right? He saves us. Okay? Okay. All right. Jesus also spoke other I am statements that are recorded in the Gospel of John. Christ spoke these statements to lead others to faith in him as the promised Messiah, the Savior of the world. One last story, and then I'll give you guys your assignment. Jesus raises Lazarus. Remember, this is not a resurrection. Okay, I want you to be really careful of understanding what that term means. I've used it this way. It's more of a resuscitation. You guys know what resuscitation is? What does it have to do with? Anybody ever heard that word, resuscitation? Anybody ever heard of CPR? Okay, so if somebody stopped breathing, heart's not beating, or a combination of the two, you try to resuscitate them. You try to get them breathing again, their heart beating again. And so a lot of times we do CPR, right? Chest compressions, get the heart to beat, get air in, and so forth. So in some ways, you look at this, Lazarus had stopped breathing, heart wasn't beating, and he was dead for 4 days. Right? So 4 days, good long time. I don't know why I said that. I don't mean good long time, but a very long time. And Jesus brought him back to life. His body was not glorified. His body was still sinful. He was still going to die again one day. He was still under the judgment of God's law. So he had not been resurrected. He was not glorified like he's on his way to heaven. He was just brought back to life. And Lazarus was going to live X number of years, months after that, and then eventually going to die again. Right? So what we see in this, that's in John 11, what was the message of hope that Jesus gives to Martha? If you remember the story, and if not, I'll just tell you what it is. He tells Martha, I am the resurrection. So jot that down under there. The message of hope Jesus gives to Martha is, I am the resurrection. And so how is this hope for us as well? Well, because Jesus says, everyone who believes will be saved. Jot that down. Everyone who believes will be saved. So when he tells Martha, do you believe that I am the resurrection? She goes, yes, I believe that. He says, do you believe that everyone who believes in me will be saved? That's the good news. Okay? describe how Jesus' miracle showed both his compassion and his power. What did Jesus do at the tomb of Lazarus? It's the shortest verse in the Bible. And Joe? Jesus wept. By the way, you can't pick that for your confirmation verse, right? I'll just tell you right now, okay? So he wept. So that's his human side, the compassion. By the way, I don't believe that Jesus cried because he was sad that Lazarus had died. Why is that probably not the case? What's that? He could raise him, and he's God, right? He knew what was going to happen. It's not like he was crying going, oh, Lazarus, I'm going to miss you so much. Oh, wait a second. I'm the Son of God. Move the stone away, right? Like he forgot that he was the Messiah. I believe that Jesus cried because he was just compassionate for the people and the sadness that they felt. The reason that Lazarus died was because of sin. And I imagine that it's like, this is not a great analogy, but I'll use it. You guys ever see those commercials on TV where the ASPCA comes on, all the dogs and cats in cages, and there's that song playing in the arms of an angel or whatever it is. And you should, I know we see that commercial maybe a lot, you should kind of go, oh, right? You should feel bad for it. You're like, nobody should look at animals suffering and go, oh, good. You should have exactly the opposite opinion, kind of going, oh, that's sad for animals to suffer. Anytime you see suffering, your heart should go out to it. It just should. So Jesus does that, obviously, at a much greater scale, sees everybody crying about Lazarus being gone, and just goes, I hate what sin has done. Right? That's kind of how Jesus is responding. So he wept. But then he also, that was his compassion side, but his power side is, he raised him back to life. Right? So he did that. Okay. On the fourth page, for those of you watching the video, this is for you as well. On page 96 at the very top, one of the things that's a challenge for us to understand, and yet it's a really big concept for us, and I want you to have a handle on it for us, is that Jesus was God and man. All right? Now, when I say that, it's kind of a mystery for us to wrap our heads around it, and yet it impacts lots of things that we see throughout the Bible. So Jesus is 100% God, okay? And at the same time, he is 100% man. Now, if you're decent at math, how is that hard to understand? It's 200%, right? If I told you that my background is I'm 100% Canadian and 100% German, is that possible? No. I can be 50 and 50, I can be 30 and 70, but I can't be 100% Canadian and 100% German, okay? Because that's 200%. Yet Jesus is 100% God and 100% man. And we use the words true God and true man. He's truly God completely, and he's truly man completely. And so what we do is we use those words. So what I want you to do for an assignment for this week, you're going to come up with this, and you're going to send it to me. You can send an email, take a picture of it, whatever you want. I want you to come up 5 ways that we've covered in the last 3 lessons. 5 ways that Jesus demonstrated he's true God, and 5 ways that he demonstrated he is true man. So they're right there. Little arrow says true God. A little arrow says true man, both pointing at Jesus. I want you to come up with 5 ways. Okay? 5 ways he demonstrated he's true God. So anything that God could do, that Jesus did, that would count. Anything God could do. Anything that a man does, that's what he would demonstrate that as well. Does that make sense? Okay? Simple assignment, but I just want you to make sure you can comprehend this understanding that he is God and man at the same time. For example, I'll give you one, right? When he was raising Lazarus, when he wept, that's being a man. That's a physical thing, crying. What did he do that only God could do at Lazarus' tomb? Raised him to life. So you guys see the difference, right? He wept, that's human, okay? He rose someone to life, that's divine, that's God stuff. And just kind of walk that through, okay?